Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Levy information session. I'm Pebby Barton, Director of Communications, and tonight you'll learn about both levies on the November 2nd ballot. Question 1 is about stability through an operating levy, and question 2 is about technology through a capital projects levy. Neither question is contingent on the other, which means the questions are separate on the ballot, and one question does not have to pass for the other question to be approved. Now, we will have time where viewers can enter questions into the chat after the presentation of each ballot question tonight, and those questions will be gathered and we'll answer what we can in the time remaining at the end of the presentation. And many of those questions are actually already answered on our website on the questions and answers page at SoWashCo.org/vote2021. Now, we are recording this session for those who can't attend this virtual session or the in-person session on Wednesday, and it will be posted on our website, so you can share that with anyone who may not be available tonight. Now, thank you for joining us, and I want to turn it over to Superintendent Julie Nielsen.
Thank you and welcome. I see we have a number of people who are in the virtual meeting this evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to ask that Pepe pull up our PowerPoint. A reminder that all of our resources related to our school district levies can be found online as well, and we will share that information at the end. This evening, you will also get to hear from Dan Pyen, our Director of Finance and Operations, and I'm going to kick us off with the presentation. As we think about the November 2nd informational levy campaign, our focus, question 1 will be on stability and question 2 on technology. And what we'd like to make sure for our community is that you make that connection to the word stability with that teeter-totter or that balancing out. And question 2, that it would be technology, and you can see the iPad or Chromebook as that visual. And so we want to make sure that our community is connecting with the visual. Also, when we see this slide, we want to put a reminder out there that levies are for learning and bonds are for buildings. And so there is a difference. So the two questions on the ballot are levies. And as Pepe shared, the questions are separate and one is not contingent on the other. Next, let's take a look at how South Washington County Schools is funded. When you look at this pie chart, what you'll see is that 72% of our general fund dollars are state aid, 25% are local taxes, or the money that we currently levy. It's important to understand when you look at that entire pie, that makes up $260 million worth of state, federal, and local funds. And as I shared, that pie is the pie for our general fund dollars. This past year, we received dollars from the state. So the state added 2.45 to the basic education formula for this current school year and 2% for the 22-23 school year. What's important to note about those percentages, while we are grateful to have received that percent of increase, we know that there have been a number of years of flat funding where school districts received 0 and 0. The 2.45 and then the 2% the following year gets applied to the portion of dollars in the pie chart that are state aid. That percentage of increase does not go to the dollars that are part of our local taxes or our local levy. As we take a look at the dollar bill, so how is each dollar in South Washington County Schools spent? We think it's important that our community understands where is their money going. And so 42 cents of every dollar is spent on classroom instruction. This includes all costs that go into regular instruction and activities. Special education is approximately 20 cents, and that includes all costs related to special education. The next area, 12 cents, goes to facilities. That includes things like the cost to clean our schools, heat, cool, provide water to buildings and grounds, garbage removal, and daily maintenance and repairs. Next, student information is an additional 11 cents. And student support for 11 cents is transportation, counseling, health services, psychological and mental health services, and social work. District support makes up 6 cents of that dollar, and that includes areas like human resources, payroll, school elections, census, student information, technology, finance, and legal. And next, at 6 cents, instructional support, curriculum, media centers, instructional related technology, staff development, and teaching and learning. And then the final 3 cents makes up superintendent and school principals along with our school board. And so that is how the cents within our dollar are spent here in South Washington County Schools. Many of you recall earlier in the school year in January, we went into a budget adjustment process as we looked at where we were at financially. And so this slide shows our 3-year budget adjustment process. It's important to note that for this current operating school year, we have reduced $9.4 million from our general fund budget. Year 2 has an additional $7.5 million. It's important to note that in there, with that approval of that package by the board, that did include $6.6 million, which was for the referendum. And so that leaves another $900,000 that we would need to reduce year 2, and then year 3 is $100,000. It's important when we share this budget adjustments process and we think about the transparency of the school district as it relates to budget. There are a number of measures that we have in place. The first, and one that many of you have heard about, is our Citizens Finance Accountability Committee. And what that committee does is they work with our Director of Finance, Dan Pyen, who you'll hear from. And these are community members who work with our finance department and our director to talk about how the school district is doing with its budget. In addition, as part of this 3-year budget adjustment process, we also convened a group to monitor and to make sure that the adjustments we said we were making, that we are actually implementing. And then finally, by state law, yearly, we have to conduct audits by an outside agency. And so there are a number of measures in place to check and monitor the transparency and the spending of our district budget. So let's take a closer look at ballot question 1. And as Pepe shared, I would ask that you jot down any questions and we will leave time in between where you can enter those. But ballot question 1, again, you see the teeter-totter marking stability. Question 1 is focused on stability, and it is an operating levy. Operating levies are voter approved and provide funding for classrooms, instruction, and other school operating costs. When we think about question 1, oh, I think we missed one, but Pepe, can you just slide back? I guess we didn't. Here we go. We're moving forward. Our current challenges for question 1, when we look at where we're at as a school district. First, our savings account or our unassigned fund balance is below school board policy, and that is at 4.7%. That 4.7% equates to about 2.5 weeks of actual operating costs. In addition, our current challenge was this past year, we needed to make reductions of $9.4 million and now have implemented those as we started this school year. And then finally, that continued current challenge is that federal, state, and local funding is not keeping pace with inflation or the educational needs of our students. This next graph gives a good look at the instability that our district has faced related to funding. And so just overall, what we wanted to show is that in our general fund or that unassigned fund balance, you can see that it has been up and down. Many of you who have been in the community for a number of years, you know that in 2013, 2015, and 2017, we passed stepping into the future levies that were put for operating. And so it's important to note what happened after 2017. Once those dollars were received in 2018, you could see that there was a slight increase going up. And then as the pandemic hit, you can see that there was a drop. And again, the important thing is to just see the instability. And so our goal, of course, with question 1 is stability. And you can see that the board policy is set at 5 to 9%. And we are currently operating with 4.7% in the fund balance. This next slide is important. This takes a look at the actual funding that South Washington County Schools receives for the year 2021. And you will see that amount is $6,567. What you'll see is the dashed line above shows what the actual state funding would be if it were adjusted for or by inflation. And you can see that gap equals $561, or in total for South Washington County Schools, that would mean an additional $10.4 million. And if you think back to the reductions made this past year, that was $9.4 million. And so with the additional dollars of interest from what we received from the state, you can see that we would have had enough dollars with $10.4 million that we would not have needed to have made those reductions. So let's take a closer look at what is on the ballot November 2nd. The first point around question 1 instability is it will revoke and replace. And what that means is we have 2 other outstanding levies from 2015 and 2017. I call those the stepping into the future years, 2015 and 2017. Those are both operating levies. And so the goal of question 1 is to revoke and replace with a brand new operating levy. That levy would not need to be renewed until 2031 and would also include an annual increase at the rate of inflation. And that is important because when it's flat funding, we need to be assured that we can settle contracts and pay employees as we go across the years. Increasing funds, we would be going from $1,536 per student to 1,886 students, or an increase of $350 per student for a total of $6.9 additional million dollars. The financial impact, and we have used the $300,000 value home as an average throughout our entire district. And the estimated tax impact on that average homeowner of a $300,000 home would be about $13.16 more per month, or $158 per year. If voters do not approve question 1, if voters approve question 1, it would provide that operational stability so the district can address challenges with growth in the community, facility needs, and uneven enrollment increases. Prior to the pandemic, our long-range facility group was meeting, and we had actually gotten down to the point where we had 2 middle school, 2 high school, and 2 elementary options on the table as we looked at needs. And before we can go back and readdress some of those facility needs, we need to make sure that operationally that we are stable. I have heard of way too many districts who build buildings and then cannot afford to operate. It's important to know when we talk about the challenges of growth in our community, and I know that we can see homes going up everywhere across our community. It's important to note that right now at East Ridge High School, we are 200 students over capacity. And that really exists, that space, lack of space exists across our high schools, middle schools, and in our elementaries, we do have additional space to the tune of about 2,000 seats. But that would require something different just because of the location of the schools. It would limit additional budget cuts to programs and staffing. If it's approved, it would offset the required and unfunded costs for special education and English language and related services. It's important to note that when we talk about unfunded mandates, we're talking about almost $23 to $24 million that we provide for special education and EL services. And again, if approved, it would put us on track to meet the school board policy that currently requires 5 to 9% in that savings account. If voters do not approve, I don't think that it's a surprise when we think about what would happen, but obviously there would be potential cuts to staff and academic programs, athletics and activity programming, administration and support staff. We would need to re-examine attendance boundaries to reduce transportation costs. And then the final one is examining inefficiencies with low enrollment schools and addressing the challenges. And we see neighboring district St. Paul, they came out and they did a study on some of low enrollment schools. And so certainly something that we would need to think about and consider as we look at our elementaries and staffing from 230 students to almost 800 students across the district. And so at this time, I am going to pause and we'll give the group about 30 seconds to a minute to enter any questions as it relates to question 1. And as you're typing in the chat, I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Finance and Operations, Dan Pyan.
Good evening. As Julie said, I'm Dan Pine. I'm the Director of Finance and Operations. And I will talk to you about ballot question number 2, which is centered around technology. Ballot question number 2 about technology is a capital projects levy. So what is a capital projects levy? Well, capital projects levy provides funds for improved instructional technology, support staffing, maintenance and support for students, staff devices, enhanced technology infrastructure. Capital projects levy is a dedicated revenue stream for technology. It may only be used for technology. And when we talk about our dedicated funds and what we have to put into technology, we're talking about educational software, such as Schoology and Seesaw. We're talking about devices for 18,500 plus students, 1,500 plus staff, and computer displays for distance learning. We're talking about our business systems, departmental computers, our payroll software, our human resource software, and our finance software, as well as our student accounting software. And we're talking about infrastructure, which includes many wires, Wi-Fi, includes servers, includes switches. So as we look at technology, what our current challenges are, well, we have to maintain and upgrade 20,000 different devices that are distributed during the pandemic. We know we have an expanded dependence on educational technology for personalized learning in and outside the classroom. And we know that all these devices for every student requires modern and reliable technology infrastructure. Keeping our infrastructure safe and secure, even things like cybersecurity, which in order even to get insured for our softwares and our systems, it's a big price tag just to buy the software to keep up our cybersecurity. So as we talk about capital project levies, we looked out to see which districts in the state had what are called capital project levies. And we found over 50 districts in the state have capital projects levies for technology. SoWashCo Schools has one in place right now for $2 million per year. Our levy per student is the lowest in the state at $112 per student for capital projects levies for technology. What we levied right now, the $2 million, does not cover the cost of all our technology costs. This chart will show you of the districts in the top 10 in student population, what they levy for technology when they have capital projects levies. So you can see that we're in the bottom in the top 10 district populations. Rosemont Apple Valley, 191, Osseo 304, Robbinsdale 375, Minneapolis 400, and Wayzata 564. Another district that's not on this list because they're not as large in the top 10 is Hopkins, which we're familiar with. They levy $1,500 per student for technology. This revoke and replace would switch our number from $112 per student to $270 per student for capital projects levies. So what's on the ballot for technology for the capital projects levy? Well, it's a revoke and replace, much like question 1. Right now, the voters approved in 2017 a capital projects levy of $2 million. Capital projects levies come in flat amounts. It's not per student. We're looking to revoke the $2 million and replace it with a $5 million capital projects levy. Stability-wise, this would last for 10 years and would not need to be renewed until 2031. As I said before, this will increase our funds from $112 levied per student to $270, or from in the flat amount from $2 million a year to $5 million per year for technology. We will note that as I looked at those other districts too, that Stillwater is going out for a capital project levy for their first time. Stillwater is asking for $4.7 million with about half the number of students we have, and we're asking to increase it to $5 million. Financial impact of this question. An average home in this district of $300,000 would be about $4.16 per month. Or, in other words, $49.92 per year. If question 2 is approved by the voters, this funding would help expand digital access to curriculum and learning tools. It would allow us to update educational and business software licensing. It will help maintain the devices distributed to students and staff during the pandemic with a refresh cycle to keep devices updated. It will strengthen personalized learning through technology, and it will enhance our technology infrastructure, our Wi-Fi, our network equipment, and our hardware and our switches. If question 2 is not approved by the voters, the device and technology costs would come from the general fund. Right now, we have our technology funded with about 3 different buckets. This will allow all the technology to be funded with one bucket, allow those other buckets of funding to be used for different missions and motives of the school district. Technology support and device maintenance for families and staff would be limited. We would not be able to staff enough people to maintain all those devices at the highest level possible. And device upgrade cycles would be delayed. Our refresh cycles would have to last longer. The computers would have to last longer. We'd probably have to do a lot of replacements before their time. So to summarize, on November 2nd, there are 2 questions. Question 1 is focused on stability. So revoke and replace. So we're combine and replace the 2015 and 2017 operating levies with one operating levy to provide funds for classrooms, instructions, and other school operating costs. And question 2 is about technology. It would combine the 2017 capital projects levy into a new levy for improved instructional technology, tech support staffing, maintenance and support for student and staff devices, enhanced technology infrastructure. That amount would go to $5 million. And just keep in mind that in the capital projects levy, the dollars raised can only be used for the purposes put forth in the ballot concerning technology. So if you look at the questions on November 2nd, and we look at the tax impact, question 1 is an operating levy. Will provide an additional $350 per student, raising about $6.9 million per year, and it will include a clause to increase with inflation. The tax impact on that is about $13 on a $300,000 valued home per month. Question 2 is a capital projects levy. We provide an additional $158 per student for technology needs, raising about a total of $3 million more per year. And on a $300,000 value home, the tax impact in the first year is $4.16 more per month. So with the 2 questions combined, it's an increase of $9.9 million per year in both operating funds and technology funds. And the tax impact on that is about $17.32 more per month on a home valued at $300,000 in the South Washington County School District. As a reminder, the election day is Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021. Early in-person voting began on Friday, September 17th. That ends on Monday, November 1st. There is one Saturday that you may do early in-person voting. That is on October 30th from 8 to 3. Early in-person voting is at 4 sites in the county. One in Cottage Grove at the Service Center. One in Woodbury at the library at Central Park. One in Stillwater at the Washington County Courthouse, and 1 in Forest Lake. Early voting by mail. Oops, I'm sorry. That's okay. They could have saw it. Early voting by mail is available. Look on minvotes.org. And regular polling locations on that day on November 2nd are 7 to 8. And you can look to see where your polling location is at minvotes.org. And if you need any information about the election or the referendums, visit SoWashCo.org/vote2021. With that, I thank you for your time, and we welcome any questions or discussion.
Thank you. We do have one question. How were the 25,000 devices paid for originally? And just a quick correction, it was about 20,000 devices. And then they're just asking about kind of the breakdown for those numbers. So just a quick reminder, there was 18,000 plus student devices, but also we had to have teachers ready for distance learning teaching as well. And so there was 1,500 staff devices out of that 20,000 or so number of devices distributed last year. And so Dan, the question was, how were those devices paid for at the time?
Well, we have a regular refresh cycle on our devices, both for the students and the staff. We were able to utilize CARES Act dollars for the deployment of most of the student devices. Obviously, that was one-time money, and those will have to be refreshed sooner or later, and that's one need we need to plan for the future on what to spend for. But we generally in our budget have a refresh cycle at about 4 years for teacher devices and about 4 years for student devices, depending on how we feel it's going. They're paid for out of the regular technology budget.
And so Pepe, I might just add, while someone brought up some of the federal funding, I know that was on one of my slides, so I didn't go through it in great detail. But I think we know that in some of the communication, it talked about how many dollars school districts received. It's important to note that as Dan talked about those federal dollars, many of them were set aside for certain expenditures, and they could not be ongoing. These are one-time dollars. And so to invest in staff typically would mean that it would be a longer term. And so just to give the group listening a little bit of an idea of how many federal dollars South Washington County Schools received, we received $557 per pupil. And I believe our total amount, Dan, is about $10 million total. Of course, we divided it, $557 per pupil. It's important to note that when we think about the other 5 largest school districts in the state, Anoka, which is the largest school district, received $1,500 per student. Minneapolis received almost $7,500 per student. St. Paul, $9,000 per student. Osseo, $2,000 per student. And Rave, which is the district just one step bigger than us, they received $1,300. And so the amount that school districts received was based on the census and the poverty level. However, we would say that the spending of masking and sanitizers, et cetera, those were all pretty set costs. And so South Washington County Schools received, with those federal dollars, $557 per pupil.
Thank you, Superintendent. And Dan, that did ask a question I got in a direct message, but there's also one more direct message I received that we might be able to answer. What is the district assuming for future state funding support for the district? And are we assuming any large increases or decreases in the amount of funding that we get from the state through 2031?
Our financial projection models assumes a 2% increase on the basic education formula from the state. And the other aids that we have to project, are based on other factors like special education and things like that. But 2% on the formula. To remind you, the state increased the formula by 2.45% last year and 2% in the next coming year. But that's the number we use.
For us, and you might be able to answer this, Dan, I'm not sure. For stability funding, what will be the monthly financial impact at 2031 with the current inflation rate?
Just talk a little bit about the inflation rate and how it's calculated.
Well, I can't do the tax impacts for 2031 because so much of it relies upon the property tax values and what the total school district property tax values are. We really only know what the values are this year. It depends on which way they go as far as the mix between residential and commercial. But as far as the inflation rate would go on the question, Minnesota Department of Education uses the Consumer Price Index to calculate and allocate that inflation rate. And as I look back at what it is, and you can look it up on MDE, but it ranges somewhere between over the years 1.5 and 2.1%. But I really can't project out what a tax impact would be 10 years from now, mainly because I don't know what the property values are going to be.
And a question, so it was noted that bonds are different from levies in that bonds relate to facilities. And then on the dollar graphic, it showed about 12 cents toward facilities. Can you elaborate a bit more on the difference? Is it a bond equals new buildings and 12 cents of every dollar is actually the operating and ongoing costs?
Yes, that's exactly right. The 12 cents on the dollar, those are our general fund costs, and those are our daily operational costs. So the facility costs will include, obviously, all the cost of all the maintenance workers and the custodians, the electricity, the natural gas, the water bills, then your other services, and they'll include your minor upkeep. But the major repairs and replacements are done through a different program called long-term facility maintenance. Then obviously, if you build a new building, that requires voter approval, and that would be a bond.
And a question about the devices. This person says their children is benefiting from the use of devices. Were voters given the option to purchase the devices with the CARES Act funds?
Okay, Pepe, can you repeat that? Were voters given the option?
Yeah, were voters given the option to purchase the devices with the CARES Act funds? And I think the short answer is that the CARES Act funds only went through the school district. And so the devices were bought by the school district, but that's also a lease, correct, Dan? We have a lease for the devices.
Yeah, generally, we try to do the best financing available. Finance rates are so low right now, it made more sense for cash flow reasons to spread the cost of the devices over the life of the devices.
And who or which group decided to spend money on the devices?
Well, I would say the group that decided was our executive cabinet. When we looked at the need to go distance learning and needing to make sure that we could connect with students. Not only were students given a device, but we had a number of students and families who were also in need of internet. And so hotspots were provided so that we could continue with educating students even in the middle of a pandemic.
And a question about the levies themselves. If when's the next time a levy can be proposed to voters if neither of these pass?
Technically, an operating levy may be proposed any year that the board decides to do it. Operating levy, the election can only be held on election day unless a school district is in statutory operating debt. Just as a side note, a bond election, there are 5 days of which the legislature has announced that they can happen, and those happen throughout the year, depending on what the school board decides.
And I'm not seeing any additional questions right now, but just a reminder that SoWashCo.org/vote 2021 has a lot of answers to questions already. So I would encourage everyone to visit the question and answer section on the vote page, as well as there's full downloads and one-pagers so that you can download and print and read those later or share with others. In addition, there is voting information. And as you saw on the tax impact example for a $300,000 value home, you can use the tax impact calculator online to enter your home's real value and see how much more per month the levies could cost for your residential property, commercial property, and as well as apartment property with 4 or more units. An enrollment question, which I don't know if we have off the top of our head, but how many students did the district lose during COVID? And that's probably a timeline we kind of want to define as we answer that question.
Certainly. Well, we do know, the raw numbers that between 2019-20 and 2021, the 2 different school years, we had a reduction of 314 students.
And Dan, how is enrollment now compared to that loss?
It looks to be that we're at about 18,620, which would be an increase from last year of about 170.
Okay, and I don't see any additional questions, but as a reminder, we also have an in-person information session this Wednesday from 6 to 7 p.m. at Oltman Middle School. And it'll be the same presentation you're seeing tonight. How confident are we that these levies will be sufficient through 2031?
I would say that we are as confident as the dollars coming in from the state. We rely on our taxpayers and our residents for these operating levies. And I think it's important that when we talk about state funding keeping pace, school districts across Minnesota have experienced years of flat funding, 0%, 0%, and 0%. There actually are 2 strings of 3 years where school districts receive 0%. And I think, as Dan shared, that what we're budgeting on is that 2% from the state. And if that holds true, I believe that we are in a good position to be operationally stable until 2031.
And a similar question, if levy 1 or question 1 does pass, they just wanted to understand correctly that another levy wouldn't be brought to voters until after 2031. I believe the wording was specifically that if this levy passes, that it would be a 10-year levy. And the new thing with this levy that most other school districts do is that it is tied to inflation. So that would put us in a better place. As you know, if a levy is passed in 2017, the funds that were passed at that time don't go as far as you move out because of inflation. So that should help. And Julie or Dan, did you want to add anything to that question?
No, I would say that the rate of inflation factor adding on to those dollars will be a huge help for South Washington County Schools. And so while I won't make any promises about 2031, we certainly would hope that those dollars would get us through with the rate of inflation factored in.
I don't see any additional questions right now, but anyone can vote early right now. That started on, I believe, September 17th and goes through November 1st. And there are 4 early in-person voting sites in Washington County that you can find on our tax information section on our website at SoWashCo.org/vote 2021. And I don't see any additional questions. So I would like to thank everyone for joining us, and I'll turn over to Julie and Dan.
Thank you. Just before we close up, Dan and I have been going out and doing a number of presentations across our communities to various groups. And please know if there are any other questions that individuals have, please reach out to one of us. We are happy to make sure that you have the information that you need. Our goal in this is to make sure our community members are informed. They know what's at stake. And to really think about the stability our district needs in order to operate so that we can focus on the growth within our community, as well as the continued dedicated funds for technology. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. And again, as Pepe shared, we will be back together in person on Wednesday for another session. Thank you so much.